What up guys, my Ian here. Thank you again for checking out my content, for subscribing, and for helping my channel grow. So in this video, I'm actually gonna go over the way that I have set up my new workflow, where like the center of everything is gonna be my Elektron machines, and they're gonna be my sketch pads, and everything is going to be routed with the Octatrack. All right guys, let's get to it. So whenever I'm going through a process like that, I want to know what I want to do. You know, like building sketches, transforming them into a full-blown track, bridging the gap between machines and computer and all this stuff. You know, once you start making music to release, I think it's key. Make sure that everything is connected and is usable. I think that the way that how Elektron works and how you're like able to like sketch patterns and everything, you know, being able to like send signal to like my Moog or like pedals and all this other stuff, like this thing is crazy. So I just want to make sure that I'm able to like get those sounds out there. So that was like, you know, like my question number 2 that I had in my mind. You can actually like do this, you know, by Dixie chaining MIDI, and that shouldn't be an issue, right? I think that the biggest problem that I had was when I was like trying to bring in, you know, soft synths into my production, right? After I was like done sketching ideas and everything, doing a Dixie chain, yes, I can hit record on Logic and then I start playing around. But when it came down to like make sure that everything was in time, that was like, okay, I cannot really do that. The next thing, right, after determining like my gear requirements, was actually like, okay, like what elements do I need? What elements do I have in my gear that will allow me to do that? So of course, the ERM Multiclock will bridge that gap, right? I know that my projects eventually are gonna be like, you know, 80% hardware, 10% plugins. It could be vice versa, depending on how I'm feeling. So that is another thing that I wanted to make sure that I was hitting, and that was on target. All right. So connectivity for sure is key, because I don't want to be, you know, like shooting myself in the foot. When I record everything and I try to like bring some other elements in, it's not gonna sound good. If you guys have followed me, this thing right here, it's really amazing when it comes down to like writing chords and all this other stuff. So I want to make sure that I'm like super flexible when it came down to creating, right? Creativity should be flexible, you know, it should be as raw as possible, but it shouldn't like be so complicated then you lose track of like what you're doing, because if not, it's like you lose the essence of like what you're doing. So that was like the other thing that I had in my mind. A couple of things, right? Knew that I was going to use my computer. Elektron was going to be like the center of what I was doing. My inputs and everything around the studio, how I wanted to like route it. The key to all of this is making sure that the computer is sending proper clock to all these other machines, even like a modular synthesizer. Yes, I have a modular. I'm not trying to prove it to you guys, but I just want to make sure that like all those machines are talking at the same time together, because if not, it just, to me, that's one of the things that is more disappointing. It's like, okay, like it's not on time, and then I have to go back and like figure out what was like the problem and all this other crazy stuff. The way that I have figured out the best way to do it is with the ERM Multiclock, sending audio signal from their plugin from Logic directly to the ERM Multiclock, and then the Multiclock sending signal to all the other machines in the studio. So then the way that I was going to connect it, and like what was the element that was going to be managing, you know, all the MIDI signal or the MIDI notes, for me is the Octatrack. All right, the Octatrack is going to send MIDI signals or MIDI notes directly into the ERM Multiclock, and then is going to send signal to all the other machines. The flexibility of the Octatrack regarding like the sequencer is just something that you cannot rival with all the other machines. It's just really amazing. The other thing is the connectivity between the machines, right? I'm going to go over the way that you should set up your machines, your Elektron machines. So like MIDI signal that allows me to like change patterns on all machines. And one thing that I find beautiful about that is that you can just build on different patterns, and you're going to affect the different tracks. You know, I understood before how you can do that with individual machines. So once you're able to connect the Octatrack to generate that for all the other machines, is just absolutely beautiful. So let's get into the connectivity. So we're going to go into MIDI, And then in MIDI, we are gonna go to the MIDI sync. And then one thing that you wanna do here is you wanna make sure that your setup is, the transpose is set up to send. Then clock is also set up to send. This is for the first part, and you're sending the signal from the Octatrack to the ERM Multiclock before you get into logic and all this other great stuff that we're going to do later. The other thing that you want to make sure is that you're sending program change, and the channel that you're setting up as the one that's going to be setting up, sending the program changes is set up to a channel that is not being used in any of the other machines as auto channels. Right? That's really important because if not, it can cause conflict. So after that is done, we're gonna go into channels on the Octatrack, and then we're gonna change auto channel change. We're gonna switch it from 11, which I think is the one that is factory presetted as the one that does that, to channel 10. You can set up the channels however you want to. Soon after that, you are completely done, and then you're going to hit save. Now let's jump into the rhythm. In rhythm, we're going to do the following. We're going to go with sync, and then we're going to click clock receive, clock send. We're going to unclick it. Then we're going to go transport receive. Then everything else, transfer send is going to be off. Program change receive is going to be on because we want to be receiving information from the Octatrack. Program change is going to be off. Then ports in. So the ports, turbo, since I'm using the ERM Multiclock, turbo doesn't work because you have a machine between all the other Elektron machines. So we're going to leave that as off. Then ports, I'm going to go with MIDI because everything through the Multiclock is connected via MIDI cables. So we're going to leave that to MIDI. The input's going to come from MIDI or USB. That doesn't really matter. The same for the output. Okay. And then everything else is going to look like that. Right. Then we're going to go to channels. This one's really important when it comes to the rhythm, because if you leave those on, the tracks 1 through 12, which simplify the pads, every time that you send MIDI signal to any of those channels is going to be activated on the rhythm. And then for the auto channels, right, we want to make sure that we have the auto channel on 10 and the program in channel on 11. That's really important for later on. Program channels auto, it doesn't really matter. So after that, you're going to make sure that you are actually saving. So you're saving your template. You're going to rename it and do whatever you want. You're going to want to do that for every machine that we're going to be working with. Just so you guys know, we're going to jump into the Analog 4. It's a similar process, right? We're going to go into MIDI configurations, sync, the same idea as the rhythm. Nothing really changes, right? The same for ports. Make sure that everything is on. So live recording you want on because that is going to send it, just in case you want to use the Elektron Octatrack to send MIDI notes directly into the Analog 4. Then again, channel 1, 2, 3, 4. This is really important to keep track of your channels, right? Because once you have more than one machine, all of those channels are going to change, and you have to keep that in mind for the multi-clock as well. So channel 1 through 4 are going to be like my 4 voices of the Analog 4. Then we're going to go down to auto channel. So the auto channel, set it up to 10. And then the program change, set it up to 11. All right. This is standard for all the machines that we're going to be using from Elektron. Now we're going to go to the Digitone. Kind of like the same idea. We're going to go to MIDI configurations, like pretty much the same. Clock receive is going to be on, clock send is going to be off, program change receive is going to be on, and program change send is going to be off. Ports, the same idea as the other machines. Nothing changes. Just make sure that you hit all the buttons the same. And then on track channels, this is important, right? From 1 through 4 are the 4 voices of the Analog 4. Then 5 through 8 are going to be the 4 voices of the Digitone that we're going to be using. Then we're going to turn off all the MIDI channels because we're not going to send any signal from the Digitone directly to other machines. And then again, you want to make sure that the auto channel is set up to 10 and the program changes is set to number 11. And that is it for the Digitone. Make sure that you save. So now we're gonna move in to the multiclock, right? And this is where the multiclock gets a little bit tricky to understand, but I think that once you get past this, it's such a beautiful machine. So one thing with the multiclock is that you have 4 different ways of sending signal to the machine that you're in multiclock. One, you can use USB directly from your computer to your multiclock. I think that one's pretty cool if you want to send MIDI notes from your project directly to one of the machines and you're not depending on the MIDI clock from the machines. Then you also have MIDI audio in, which is the clock that is going to be sent and reproduced from the plugin that they give you to send signal to the machine. And then you also have MIDI, which you could send MIDI clock from other machines like the Octatrack directly into the ERM multiclock. If you were sending the MIDI sound like we're going to do later, or the MIDI clock as we're going to do later from Logic to all the other machines, you're going to set that audio in. And if you wanted to use the multiclock as the clock source, you're gonna like put it into internal. So time signature, you're gonna go 8/8 and 4/4. Just leave it like that. Then we're gonna go into the configurations, right? So machine mode is gonna be POS. Free will, you're gonna have it as off. Remote, you're gonna have it as off. And then we're gonna go into the MIDI mapper. And this is where it gets really interesting and tricky, right? So MIDI 1, which is what's going to be sending signal to the Octatrack, you're going to leave it at 16 or whatever channel you have decided to send MIDI clock from. I have set up my output 1 of the multiclock for my Octatrack, okay? Then output 2, so MIDI number 2 equals MIDI number 1 of the machine that I'm trying to affect. So in this case will be the analog 4. And then we're going to go down from 2 to 5. That's going to be for my analog 4. Then we're going to go from 5 to 9 is going to be the output of the multiclock that's going to be sent to the Digitone. So I can control channels 5 through 8 of the Digitone. So for the output 4 is going to send the MIDI signal to the analog rhythm. Okay, that is just going to be clock pretty much, just to make sure that clock is getting sent there. And the other thing, which is important, is that that output is also going to carry the signal for the change that we're going to be doing in our pattern changes in the Octatrack. It is really important that channel MIDI 11 and channel 11 of all the machines, it's clicked on for the outputs of the multiclock. Because once you send a parameter change, the Octatrack to all the other machines is going to change directly. So now let's move on to our connections in Logic. So the first thing that we have to do in Logic is we want to go to preferences and we want to make sure that the audio, because in my case, and it might be a little bit different for you, but since I'm going to be recording through the Apollo Twin, I want to have the least amount of latency as possible. So I am going to turn off the software monitoring because it takes one less step in the process of the machine for recording. So that's going to be more on time. The sounds that are coming directly from the machine. Then the other thing is that I went ahead and just labeled all my IOs just to make sure that I understood what channel is going to come through. So as you guys can see, all the ADAT that is coming from my preamp is going to go directly into those channels in Logic. Then we're going to go into the Apollo console just to make sure that everything is routed accordingly. The multiclock sound that you see is that's the plugin, right? So that plugin is going to send signal directly into the output of the Apollo, output 3. So let's check out the matrix of the Apollo. And right there, I have it set that line 3 is going to go directly to send signal from the plugin of the multiclock to all the rest of the machines. So once that routing is completely done, you should be clear to go to start jamming and recording your sessions. So now let's go back and see how everything has been is connected through the Octatrack, and then how I'm able to like jam and then record directly into Logic. and I can use all my Elektron machines as my sketch pads. All right, let's get to it. So right now, everything is in pattern 1, and I'm gonna hit pattern 2 by clicking the button pattern and then track 2 on the Octatrack, and that's going to change the pattern of all the other machines. As I progress in this jam session, you're gonna see me changing the patterns in the Octatrack, and that's how I'm jamming, and that's how I'm gonna be recording my songs. Alright guys, so this was my new setup, my new and improved setup on how I'm able to like work with Logic and my machines and all this other stuff. Hopefully this cleared a couple of your questions regarding how to do the routing and everything. If you enjoyed this video, hit the bell, click subscribe so you can get more videos, and there's some more videos over here. Alright guys, peace.